A very warm welcome to everyone and wishing everyone a great start to the 2015-16 school year. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Clara Howard and I'm the Superintendent of Program, and I am delighted to be here today with you to see Dr. Stuart Shanker. I'm so excited. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome up the Supervising Principal of Special Education, Michael Wilcox, who will do the formal welcome to Dr. Shanker.
Good morning, everybody. So it's my privilege today to be able to introduce our guest speaker. He's been described as the mind behind the science of self-regulation. He is a distinguished research professor of psychology and philosophy at York University and the creator of TMC. Before TMC, Dr. Stuart Shanker served as director for several organizations, including the Milton and Ethel Harris Research Initiative, the Council of Human Development, and the Canada-Cuba Research Alliance. He is also a former president of the Council of Early Childhood Development. Dr. Shanker attended the University of Toronto, where he received his bachelor's and master's degrees. After winning a scholarship to study at the University of Oxford in England, Stuart obtained his bachelor's in philosophy and, studying under Jerome Bruner, his doctorate in philosophy with distinction. Stuart Shanker is an expert who has been sought internationally. He's been an advisor on early child development to government organizations across Canada and the US. Also in Australia, Bosnia, Colombia, England, Hungary, Ireland, Mexico, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Peru, Romania, Serbia, and now Windsor. He has received many awards, grants, and recognitions for his work, both internationally and nationally. For those of you who are not familiar with TMC, it's the Merit Center. It was formed in 2012 by Dr. Shanker, and it's an organization working towards a vision of calm, alert students, educators, and families flourishing in physically and emotionally safe and caring environments. The TMC works with jurisdictions interested in developing and implementing self-regulation initiatives in their contexts, using Dr. Shanker's 5-step process of self-regulation and the 5 domains of self-regulation. Stuart's passion is to help children to reach their full potential through helping children and families find ways to optimize their learning, form healthy relationships, and stay motivated. He is the author of Calm, Alert, and Learning, Classroom Strategies for Self-Regulation. Please give a warm welcome for Dr. Stuart Shanker.
Self-regulation is a real game changer. The theory's been around for a while, and that's part of the problem. And the reason I say that is because, I would give these sessions, we were doing master classes across the country, and despite what Mike read to you, we've actually been focusing on Canada. It's just that we did a lot of work with United Nations, and UNESCO, and EC, but our focus is Canada, Canadian kids first. And I would come in and I'd do a master class and talk about self-regulation, and we usually would do it where I'd come back and visit a couple weeks later just to do the follow-ups. And so the teachers or the ECEs would say to me, geez, I just loved your presentation, so I went home and I thought I should learn more, and I went on the internet and I found like a dozen different definitions. So I don't know who to believe. And we actually took this very seriously. We did a major study that was published this year and found that there are 447 different uses of the word self-regulation. So don't go on the internet. And we were then able to group those into what are called concept families. There are 6 basic different uses. And the funny thing is that they all tend to confuse self-regulation with self-control. And in some ways, we've added to that problem. And there's a piece coming out tonight on the CBC where we're talking about this very issue. The problem is that this would have been part of the stuff I went over this morning for the K-6 teachers. We've got on our report cards a box, a self-regulation box. And the idea behind it was brilliant. The idea behind it was that we would use this as an opportunity to educate parents about self-regulation and give them some tips on how they can enhance their kids' self-regulation. But the problem was that we didn't actually take the time to do PD with all of our teachers so that they knew what self-regulation meant. So here's the teacher with this thing that he or she has to fill out on the report card. Well, they go on the internet. So we've got 447 different meanings of self-regulation circulating around the province. And essentially what's happened in practice is that about 90% of Ontario's boys are getting an N, and most of the girls get an S. And that doesn't help parents at all. And in fact, we were getting tons of calls saying, oh my God, I went on the internet after I saw that my kid needs improvement in this area, and it said if he doesn't get it, he's going to end up dropping out of school early, getting in trouble with the law, and so on and so on. So we had intended this to be helpful, but in fact it ended up we were doing harm. So part of our mandate is to explain what self-regulation really is. And to do that, we go back to the original definition. That's what we're going to do this morning. And we realized as we were starting to do training with early educators that there is something profoundly important going on in addition to this new concept. We're calling this a paradigm revolution, and a paradigm revolution means a dramatic shift from, in this case, looking at how we manage children's behavior to looking at how we understand children's behavior. Understanding why they are misbehaving, so-called, or why they are having trouble managing their emotions, or why they are having trouble getting along with other children, or why they don't seem to be very empathetic. Instead of trying to teach them, instead of trying to use punishments and rewards to get them to act in the ways we wanted to figure out, why are we seeing these problems? What are the root causes? And what can we do about it? Not just to reduce the causes, but to provide that child with the skills so that they could handle it for themselves. If I can give that to a kid, I have dramatically changed that child's trajectory in life. That's what we do. And what we found is we've done this now. We were just doing this thing this morning, first thing this morning. We're trying to figure out how many kids have we worked with now. And we're probably up to about 100,000 kids in Canada. So of all those kids, I haven't seen a bad kid. Not once. There is no such a thing. This is a child. This is a child who is trying to cope with an extraordinary range of stresses in that child's life. And we don't even know what stress is, and that's going to be part of our job this morning, is figuring out why kids today have so much stress in their lives. We know they're overstressed, we need to know why. So the last little piece of this puzzle as it started to fit together was that when you talk about a paradigm revolution, it involves a societal change as much as a change in how we look at children. And here the change that's going to happen is the people sitting in this room are going to be recognized as the most important profession that we have for the well-being of our nation. It's going to happen. It is happening. And I'm going to try to explain why. In these ages 0 to 5, we have an opportunity to provide children with a capacity that will enable them to deal with stress as they grow older, stress that we can't predict at this point. We have this incredible resource in our hands, and that resource are early educators, because your background is in human development. Your background prepares you to learn this theory. Originally, when we started to do this, I did this with a guy called Fraser Mustard. So Fraser had this idea that we would roll out self-regulation through physicians, through family practice docs and pediatricians. But it was a disaster because they didn't have that, they don't have the time. And on average, they see a child for 7 minutes a year. You cannot change a child's trajectory in 7 minutes. You can't know that child. In fact, what's happened today is all they know is what they see on their computer screen. There's that complete disappearance of that intimacy between physician and child family. The only resource we have as a nation is here. So I'm going to tell you what you have to do, and then you have to promise me you won't screw it up. In order for you to maximize this opportunity that you get with every child, you have to really understand what self-regulation is, okay, and what it's not. So it's not self-control. Self-regulation has nothing to do with self-control. Self-regulation is about how we manage our energy and our tension. That's what it is. Every time a child has a stress, that child has to expend energy to deal with that stress. Then the child has to recover. He has to restore his energy levels. If the kid has too much stress in his life, the recovery mechanism wears down, loses its resilience. The child starts to become in a state of chronic tension. The technical term is called kindled stress reactivity. That's what it means. What that signifies is that that child will start to have an inappropriate stress response. So a stress response where no stress, where he didn't need to have that, or he'll have an exaggerated stress response. So he gets way too upset or she gets way too upset. Or the child can't calm down after a stress reaction. So they stay, normally what we expect to see with a kid is the kid gets upset. We want to see them back, calming down within 5 minutes. But if a kid's got way too much stress in their lives, then it might last a day. It might last a couple of days. They can't come back to that baseline. I'll explain all this in 2 seconds. And then the fourth sign of heightened stress is the kid is just all over the map, highly volatile. It's called being in a very labile state. So the kid can be calm 1 second and then all of a sudden, you've got a nightmare on your hands. So those 4 conditions for the psychologists that are here, those are the 4 conditions of an allostatic overload. And all that means in English is this kid's got way too much stress. Okay, what we're seeing in Canada is a generation of kids that have way too much stress. That's what we're seeing. So we're seeing a generation of kids that are having problems in their behavior, or problems in their mood, or problems in their attention because of too much stress. And the consequence is an explosion of every kind of behavioral, emotional, or cognitive problem you can imagine. So pick a disorder, and it's climbing. ADHD is now climbing at 11.3% a year. This is absurd. Our biggest challenge right now in Canada is anxiety. It's an explosion of anxiety. So everybody here knows about the TDSD report that was done on high school students, where 76% of them are reporting having excessive levels of anxiety. What we're scared about is the explosion that we're seeing in children, little guys. We've got to figure this out. We've got to figure out why is this happening. What's the alternative? We're going to start medicating? Well, that's what's happening. We're starting to give antipsychotics to children, little guys. That's not a solution. That's you just trying to suppress the problem. You haven't done anything to figure out why that problem's there. So that's my job. That's what I've been doing my life, is trying to figure out what these stressors are. And here we have a problem because our understanding of stress is relatively simplistic. We think of stress in psychosocial terms. We think of stress as, like the stress of having too many things to do, the stress of time, or social stresses, the stress of trying, this week I've been working with a group that is trying to introduce the kind of tryout regimen used for 16-year-olds. They're now doing it for 5-year-olds who want to play tyke hockey. And I'm trying to explain to them that I think they missed the point about why we want children playing hockey. So far, I've had absolutely zero success. Because it's the parents, right? No, seriously, I've got all these parents thinking that their kid's going to the NHL, and you're trying to explain he's 5. And you don't want him going there anyways. Okay, so I thought what I'll do is I'm going to start by trying to explain to you what stress is as a scientist understands it. So the word stress was introduced in the 1930s by an incredible American physiologist called Walter Cannon. And he used the word because he took it from aerodynamics. So in aerodynamics, you get a stress on the metal, and it can cause a crack in the steel or the aluminum. So a stress, the original meaning was anything that requires energy to return the system to balance. That's what a stress is. Anything that requires the brain to burn energy to get back to balance. This idea of balance is the key to self-regulation. Self-regulation is about getting to that. Mike said in the intro, the stuff about calm and alert. The calm and alert is that balanced state. It's that perfect midline state between burning and recovering, where the child is ready to learn, ready to play, ready to mix with other kids. So there's a technical term for this, and the technical term is homeostasis. And what homeostasis means is that when you have a homeostatic system, if this is too much, just tell me. A homeostatic system is any system that has a sort of set point and then a range of variability. So the classic example of a homeostatic system is a furnace with a thermostat. And that was, in fact, Cannon's original explanation. So you set your house at 20 degrees. And if the temperature drops down to 17, the furnace goes on. And if the temperature goes above 22, the temperature turns off, the furnace turns off. That's a homeostatic system. So the system is, there's a range of variability, in the case of a furnace, 6 degrees, but your average temperature is 20. Okay? So we have mechanisms to raise the heat, we have mechanisms to reduce the heat. Well, you have that. You have a homeostatic system, a thermal regulation system, we all do. In a young child, there is about a 1 degree range in their body temperature over the course of 24 hours. So the average temperature is 37 degrees. If the child's in the early morning, they'll be around 36.7. And late afternoon, they'll go up to 37.5. So it varies during the course of the day. It's not always 37. Okay, so now, what happens if the kid's temperature drops to 36? Why? Can you say it loud? Yeah. Okay, so what is shivering, right? So shivering is really interesting because it's controlled by a little system. You see that green part in the middle of the brain? In that green part, there's this thing that sits between the green part and the brown part, and it's called the hypothalamus, and it's in charge of body temperature. So if the kid's body temperature, I'm going to get to the first part of what you said in 2 seconds. If the kid's body temperature falls too low, falls to 36 or below, it triggers shivering, which are these really rapid muscle contractions, because heat is generated as a byproduct of using your muscles. You all know that. And the last part of what she said was, and that consumes energy. So when you shiver, you're burning an awful lot of energy. Okay, so now we got a problem, right? So if the kid is cold, he starts to burn energy, so the hypothalamus sends a message to the heart, raises the heart rate, raises blood pressure. Kid starts to shiver, gets his body back up to 37. But he's now burned a lot of energy. So now what I got to do is I got to replenish that energy. I've got to kick in all of the metabolic processes that produce energy. So because if he doesn't have it, if this poor little guy has come to school without a coat, we had this one case, I think it's in the book, the case of the kid who came to school every day with goosebumps. Is that in the book? It's an interesting case where, nobody ever stopped to think, why don't we the family was poor, buy him a coat. Because he was burning so much energy trying to stay warm, there wasn't enough left to learn. There wasn't enough left to behave, so he's getting into trouble as well. Now, suppose he gets I'm going to stick with you since you knew this, he gets really hot, okay? So he gets really hot, his temperature's gone up to 37.6. Now what happens? What does the hypothalamus do to that? Good. Why? How do you know this stuff? Oh. Okay, so what she said was exactly right. So it causes the kid to sweat, perspire, because the evaporation of the moisture, and some other things, the evaporation cools the body. But it's the same story. The same story is that a whole bunch of processes are triggered in order to get his body back to 37. So he's burning energy to cool down. So he burns energy to warm up, he burns energy to cool down. Okay? That was Cannon's example of a homeostatic system. We have dozens of homeostatic systems in us, all regulated by this little part in the green brain. All of them regulated by what we call the master control system, the hypothalamus. Now, what's fascinating about this, and what's most important for you, is that in Cannon's example, the outside temperature is a stressor. So that tells you right away, stress. Now I get it. Stress is anything that causes you to burn energy in order to get back to balance. So now you should be able to start to figure out why kids are so stressed today. So what are some of the stressors that little guys, what are some of the stressors that these kids are coping with that explains why their stress levels are so high? Okay, so let me start you off. Mike gave me a real good example this morning. So I live in the country, I live on an island, and my children have grown up on an island, and both of them are unfortunately hockey players. So when my children were 6 and 9, Dad thought it would be a good idea to take them to Toronto, and I'm going to take them to the Hockey Hall of Fame. So to begin with, Dad is now insanely overstressed because it's Toronto. And I thought, as a treat, I'm going to take my children on a subway, these two little country bumpkins. My closest village is a population of 200. And the island there's 5 families. So we get on the subway. My daughter, who was 6, started to whimper, and then she does, the classic kids behavior. Okay, so I pick her up, and she buries her head in the nape of my neck, and she don't come out till we get off the subway. So I said to her, "What's the problem, sweetie?" And she said, "I want to go home, Dad." And now, I'm starting to think, the scientist in me, well, of course, the subway was crowded, it's rocking around, and on top of everything else, we come outside and she's hearing sirens and there's all these people, and she's a little thing, right? So she's, got all these, if you don't know the Hockey Hall of Fame, it's in downtown, just near the Union Station. And she says to me, "There's too many people here, Daddy, and they're all mad at me." And that's very interesting, right? We lose sight of this because they're overstressed. I mean, Toronto defines stress. And they're all rushing to get to work. And she's used to, on the island, that everybody stops. Everybody knows her by name. Everybody asks how she is. And she's used to these friendly, nurturing. She doesn't have one set of parents. She's got, 100. And they're like that with all the kids, not just my kids. So, okay, we can begin to broaden our understanding of the kinds of physical stresses that children are dealing with today. We can look at noise stress, crowd stress. Okay, so you get the idea, right?